I went from taking my first bump to 2 years later starting at the Palace in Auburn Hills on the pay-per-view.
So I always thought to myself, if I don't try this now, I'm never going to make it.
I'm sitting there and Raven's like, "Hey, Terry, what do you think about Brad came down at the power plant?" And he hangs up and I'm like, "Well, that didn't sound too good." I guess he said no. He goes, "No, you're not starting Monday. I forgot about the pay-per-view. You're starting Sunday. This is Thursday night."
Al's just sitting in there, and if I can do my Al impression for a minute. All right, and let's hope we get this done right. Otherwise, it's going to go to shit.
I get left in the ring with Harlem Heat for like 11 minutes. I took every move they've got.
Him walking me to the ring for the last 2 years was a time of my life.
I've got Magnum TA on my left side. I've got Arn Anderson on my right. And their sons are in the ring together for the first time ever.
I want to go to Lodi's place right now, man.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interview.
My first guest has been making his name known for 12 years now in the wrestling business, former Reality of Wrestling heavyweight champion, an instant classic, a legacy killer. Please welcome Matty Ice.
How you doing? How's it going, Jonah?
Good. Thank you for coming. I appreciate you being here. And my next guest is an absolute veteran in the wrestling world for over 25 years now. He's been crushing it. He looks even better today. You may know him best from his memorable run in WCW, or maybe you've seen his great public speeches as of late. Please welcome Lodi.
Hey, man. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. No, I'm happy to have you both here and dive right into this. Right off the bat, though, Lodi, we're speaking a little bit off camera. I know that you're raising money for those affected in your area by Hurricane Helene, and I would love to hear how that's going and spread awareness if you're still raising money or taking donations.
Yeah, I've got a lot of friends in Western North Carolina. All of my wrestling buddies, Cash Wheeler is up there. Some of the kids I've trained are up in the Asheville area, have homes there. Of course, Edge and Beth are there, and so Western North Carolina was devastated. I don't know how much you guys outside of North Carolina saw on TV or on the news or whatever, but a lot of the small towns and stuff are absolutely ravaged by all the water and rainfall from Hurricane Helene coming through. And so a couple of weeks ago at the gym, we raised a good bit of money, had a lot of donations come in and sent a lot of stuff up to Western North Carolina. Just had a huge concert here Saturday night in Charlotte with a lot of top country acts. Luke Combs there at church headlined it at Bank of America Stadium. And so those guys in Western North Carolina are going to need some help for quite a while. So one of the coolest things when we put out that we were raising money, I had people from all over the wrestling community send money in. And so people that weren't even from North Carolina, some that were from the Carolinas. So it was a really cool thing to see. And so I had some friends up this weekend. Actually, my dad was up vacation up in Western North Carolina. So some of the areas are coming back, but some of them are a long way from being back to normal. So keep those guys in your prayers. And if you have a chance to donate or look into that, that'd be great. Thank you for bringing that up. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. No, so cool you're able to do that. And anytime you're doing anything like that, let me know. We'll definitely spread the word.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Of course. Well, I always like to start at the beginning with these and just find out what that journey into wrestling was like for you both. Matt, I'd love to hear from you. What brought you to the world of wrestling? Tell me about it from the beginning.
I think just like most like anybody else nowadays. I don't know how it was back then, Lodi, but it's a part of it. It's like you gotta like not want to grow up a little bit to get into wrestling. You know what I mean? Like you kind of want to somewhat be a kid forever, So for me, I never really watched too much growing up. My old man would put on like WCW as a kid. And I didn't even know about WWE when I was a little kid. As a matter of fact, I think fast forward to like 06 or 07 maybe. I'm watching Cena, Attitude Adjust, Johnny, then Nitro on Raw.
Right.
And I'm like, oh my God, I forgot all about this stuff. And I had to like go back and like catch up with some of the best era of wrestling and whatnot. And so that sat with me for like, God, I want to say like give or take 4 or 5 years before I actually did something about it. I graduated community college and I got into Roosevelt University in Chicago, downtown Chicago. Okay. And the way it was when I was coming up, about 12 years ago now, was you have a time constraint on you. So I always thought to myself, well, if I don't try this now, you know, I'm never gonna make it, because by the time I graduate, you'll probably be too old to learn this stuff. I knew a little bit about, like, you're a rookie for 5 years easily, you know, and so by the time I get out of college and whatnot, I'm looking at, like, hell, I don't know, 27, 28 years old maybe. By the time I'm not a rookie anymore or considered to be, WWE worthy. So I was like, I got to go for this now. So I had a check in my hand, and I'm picking out all my classes, and the registration lady in the city, they got the bulletproof glass sliding windows up there. And she's like, all right, sir. So that's going to be, whatever, like $3,000 and change for the first semester. And I go, okay. And I walk back with the check, and I just beeline it for the elevator, right? And then I signed up at a wrestling school for the next day. That's how I got my start in the wrestling.
Put that check to much better use than those classes. Yeah.
Yeah, I did. What am I going to sit there with business administration for? I got a PhD in pro wrestling now.
That's
an awesome story. Lodi, I'd love to hear yours and if you resonate with that feeling at all.
Yeah, the whole thing about not growing up. My senior year in high school, I got 2 senior superlatives, and one was biggest flirt, and the other one was least likely to grow up. So I had to chuckle when Matty said that. I mean, seriously, that was my high school superlative, least likely to grow up. But the whole flip side of that was, so I grew up watching wrestling, and growing up in the Carolinas, I was so blessed in the '80s to grow up with Ric Flair and Dusty Rhodes and Nikita Koloff and Arn Anderson, Magnum TA and the Road Warriors and Rock and Roll Express. And so I brag all the time that I grew up in the greatest time to be a fan ever, because that was real wrestling. And so WWF was a thing, but growing up in the Carolinas, all we watched was NWA and Mid-Atlantic.
Right.
And so my dad used to take me to the Greensboro Coliseum once a month, so I got to see those guys. And so I grew up just idolizing these, larger than life figures. And I tell this story all the time because Nikita and I do a lot of ministry work together. Outside of my dad, Nikita Koloff was the first grown man who ever scared me to death. My dad always got his tickets like halfway up in the arena. I'm like, Dad, why do we sit up here? He said, well, when you sit even with the ring, you don't have to look up, you don't have to look down, you just look straight. I'm like, okay. I said, but can we sit close one time? I just want to see what these guys look like up close. And the next month, Dad got us front row tickets, and I'm up on the rail. And I'm like 15. I'm playing football. I'm working out. I'm thinking I'm pretty strong. Nikita walks out and comes right towards me. I took like 4 steps back. I'm like, that's a big man, know. And so, for me, I graduated high school, graduated college, got my degree in political science, but became a big meathead bodybuilder in school and opened up a personal training gym as soon as I got out of college in East Carolina. And had a guy come in one day, a local promoter, to ask me about sponsoring a local wrestling show. And he's like, we got to talking. And he said, my trainer needs to get in better shape, my wrestling trainer. Maybe you could teach him how to, get in better shape in the gym, and he might train you to wrestle, and you guys could do a trade-off, because he's like, you're a pretty big guy, whatever. And his trainer happened to be C.W. Anderson. Okay. So I met CW, we talked, and so CW agreed to train me. And he practiced on Tuesday and Thursday nights. We had a little barn outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, so about an hour and a half away. So I went to 4 practices. My 5th one, I showed up. And I'm putting on my boots or shoes, knee pads, whatever. And CW was already in the ring with another guy. And they were just rolling around before practice. And he looked over at me and said, Meathead, you're going to keep coming back, huh? And I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, tonight we're going to teach you how to wrestle. I'm like, you got me confused with somebody else. This is my 5th night. He goes, oh, I know. I said, well, what about those first 4 nights? He goes, bro, I was just punching and kicking you to see if you'd quit. So my first 4 nights of practice, he just beat me up, thinking I wouldn't stick with it. And I was too dumb to know any better, right? And so I just felt that's what it was. And so crazy story, and again, I know a lot of this is a God-given thing. I had my first match 2 months later. Not that I was ready. I was greener than grass. And then, about a year and a half after that, had a chance to go down to the power plant and try out for WCW. And within 3 months of being in Atlanta, Raven put me on TV. So I went from taking my first bump to 2 years later, starting at the Palace in Auburn Hills on the pay-per-view. And so that timing and stuff, I can't say that was me. That was definitely a God thing who just said, we're going to fast forward you in this whole endeavor to get you ready for what you're going to do later in life. But I kind of took the fast track. And in my mind, I thought I knew everything, but I was so green, I was blue and yellow. I just didn't know any better. But that is exactly how my deal started. And, I owe so much to Raven. I'm very thankful for him. I can say that a million times and never pay him back for all he did. And if you guys haven't seen the trailer that just dropped last Friday for his new documentary, it is going to be fantastic. If you guys haven't seen that, it's coming out, and the trailer dropped last Friday. It's phenomenal. It's about 2 minutes long, but it is going to be a really good look into the Raven character and the background behind ECW, what he did at WCW.
That's exciting. I can't wait for that. Are you in that? I haven't seen the trailer.
Yes, sir. I'll send you the link to it when we get off.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's fantastic. Cool. It's fantastic. Very, very well done. DDP posted on Twitter the other day and said, this is the best. DDP's in it. DDP said, this is the best trailer and wrestling thing I've seen since the resurrection of Jake the Snake. He said it's phenomenal. So, yeah, very good.
And that was another great piece too, Resurrection of Jake. Wow, so your life changed so drastically, and I definitely want to get into that debut on a live pay-per-view.
Right.
Matty, you also came from the world of bodybuilding or have a background in bodybuilding, right?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Yeah, I have a background in it. I didn't come from the world, but I've always, you respect it to a natural degree, when you coming up even in wrestling in my era, I was always the big guy kind of fan. And, if not a lot of people even remember, but like Jimmy Snuka and Ricky Steamboat, they both competed in bodybuilding while they were wrestlers. And not many people really even remember that or even know that. So it's always been, some kind of element towards wrestling, even before like Vince wanted to get a lot of his guys all jacked up and looked like bodybuilders. There was always an element to that in pro wrestling. So I always had this natural respect for bodybuilding and how hard it was. And the first year after COVID, so 21, really, I just decided, wrestling is kind of slowing down. Not many people can host shows as much anymore, so might as well make a run for it. I've been doing this wrestling thing for about 8-9 years at least at that point, and I was like, might as well give it a little chance. And that was the worst time to go into bodybuilding. Everybody and their mother was trying to be a bodybuilder at that point, and they were like, this was like the first show back after COVID, so they were like chomping at the bit. And here in Chicagoland, like a lot of the gyms were shut down, but at the same time, the guys who really wanted it and respected the art of working out, not lifting weight, but like working out and bodybuilding in and of itself, they found a way to work out. They found gyms that would defy the law, or the mandates, because they weren't laws.
Yeah, right.
So they would find a way. So there was still a hefty bunch of competition out there. And when I went on stage, I placed, and this is my first ever competition. So I was in 2 classes. There was a novice class, and then so I'll get to that second part later for classic physique. But I was in the novice class for classic physique, and I took 6th out of 23 people. And the guy that I lost to, no, I didn't lose to him. I missed hardware by 1 place in that division. But then I was in class D, which was like 6'2" and above, and I'm only 6'1". And when you dry yourself out, you kind of lose an inch or 2 of height because the water is in your
Wow.
kneecaps and there's water in the heels of your feet and the balls of your feet that equates to about an inch or so. So I set foot on there. They're like, yeah, you're about 6 foot. I go, that don't sound right. And they're like, yeah, no, we're going to put you in class C. So I'll go, okay, class C. And then I go and get signed in and wavered in for it. And class C they had 4 or 5 people in it. And I mollywopped every one of those guys that were in class C, except for the winner, because he was the overall winner. He was, a guy who never won a regional, but he should have won.
Yeah.
And he finally got his flowers, as they're saying nowadays. But so the guys that were in that class, I kicked the shit out of those guys. I was like in the novice division, I beat them like 3 or 4 places. And then I wasn't even put in that class because they sent me into class D and they kept me in class D by mistake. So I placed like 7th out of 15 in the class D, which is pretty cool because everybody else is taller and they weigh more than me. But I think as far as that goes, for the NPC bodybuilding, I was fairly happy with my one try. I only did an 8-week prep too. So that is something different than a lot of people. Because usually you're talking about 16
Absolutely. At least 16, 12 to 16 easy. Yeah.
But I only did an 8-week prep. My coach, actually, now that I'm on it, you've been talking with, Fodder and his buddy EC3. So EC3 has the same coach as I do, and I'm very good friends with like Moose and a lot of we call them the dump boys that work out over with Cement Factory. So yeah, AJ Sim. So he was my coach throughout that. He still is.
He's fantastic.
He's
fantastic.
Phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. Wow. Phenomenal. So he's the guy who's kept me in shape. Like since 2020, I felt like I've had one of the best indie wrestler bodies that there is right now. And that's a lot due to him. So
yeah, no, Zoom definitely doesn't do either of you guys credit. Like you guys you're massive dudes. But that's so cool. Yeah, and like we were saying, Fodder and Lodi has that connection as well. It's cool, the circle there. I've heard from him actually that bodybuilding and wrestling share like very similar when it comes to discipline with training and everything. Like it kind of all goes hand in hand. Lodi, what do you think about that? Would you agree with that?
I totally agree. Obviously, look back at my career, and I can tell you now, I know why I got a job. It wasn't because of my wrestling ability; it was because of my body. I mean, that's just, I never fully punches with that. It's always, and I tell my wrestling kids that at school. I'm like, if you've got 2 guys and their wrestling ability is even close to equal, but one's got a great body and one's got a mediocre body, if you own the company, who are you hiring?
Yeah.
You're hiring the body guy every time. You just are, because it's more attractive, it's more appealing, it's going to put more butts in the seats. It's just one of those things. Wrestling's a cosmetic business. It just is, Yes, there's one Kevin Owens. Yes, there's one Rey Mysterio, but there's one. If you don't have something special, you better look the part. And I say that over and over again. And so, and when my kids question that, I pull up some of my videos from 1997 when I was wrestling Horseshoe, who was Luther Reigns, who came back and wrestled with.
Yes.
Remember Luther when Luther came back?
Yeah.
I've got an indie show of me and Luther, and we are just jacked to the gills. And I'm like, this guy right now, I'm talking about myself, I'm like, this guy gets a job today with WWE. And all my kids are like, oh my God, Lodi, you were jacked. I'm like, yeah, that's what we all looked like back then.
Luther Reigns had some incredible discipline.
Yeah,
incredible discipline. The guy that trained me, who he did a lot of work with Luther Reigns, and they were when WWE like extra work before he came up, right? And I swear to you, every morning these guys would be going to breakfast and whatnot at the hotel, and he'd be coming down the stairs like, coming to get breakfast with us? Like, got to get my cardio in. He'd be doing fasted cardio before it was even considered fasted cardio. Wow. That's how disciplined this guy was.
Luther was one of the first guys I met at the power plant back in '97 when we were at the power plant together. Yeah.
Jackson, sorry to interrupt on you there.
No. You're good. That's the thing, man. I mean, it's funny how we had those, like you said, those connections. and Matt, and I was so proud of Luther because Luther lost his job at WCW. Do you guys know that story?
No.
He ended up in prison. He got fired. He failed 3 consecutive drug tests and got let go and ended up in prison and came back out and got back in shape and got back into WWE. So that's why I think he's a wonderful success story. He bombed at WCW. Because he was making,
especially at the time.
Yeah, he was making a lot of money to go to the power plant. See, he was under contract to train. He and Sick Boy were both under contract because when they started the power plant, they went to WWE and had a trial, or WWF at the time had a trial, and Vince offered them money. They came back, and Page went to Bischoff and said, "Hey, these guys are going to leave the plant," and Bischoff threw them $75,000 a year just to work out and train to keep them. And then so one of the things was in Atlanta. This was crazy for me when I first moved down there. When you went out to the clubs in Atlanta, whatever clubs it was, like everybody knew if you were one of the power plant guys, and they were expecting you to be one of the next big wrestling stars. So they treated us like royalty before we ever made it to TV. It was crazy how that happened. And I learned that from the guys I was going out with. When I first got down there, I was like, this is all new to me. Like, they're like, oh, you're at the power plant? I'm like, yeah, what does that mean? They're like, the girls were just crazy about it. It was absolutely ridiculous. And so, Horseshoe at the time, Luther Reigns, his gimmick at WCW was Horseshoe. Go look up some of his Saturday night stuff if you never saw it. He had a whole thing where he had a horseshoe shaved in his head. He had a whole thing where there's no business like shoe business. And he would do his hands in a bro. He looked like $1 million, but he had a bad drug problem. And he failed 3 consecutive drug tests and got fired. And I'd moved out to LA and was doing some acting. And he would call me late at night before he ended up in prison. Like, Lodi, can you help me out? I'm like, bro, I can't. I'm sorry. And so to see him come back and do what he did at WWE after that, and he left to go back to work with his wife, who was a real estate chick. And he said, he left on good terms from Vince. He walked away. So that was really cool of him. But like, I did some spot jobs for WWE after I broke my neck the second time. And I'll never forget one of the pay-per-views, he was working with Charlie Haas, and Charlie was supposed to put him over. And Charlie was bitching and moaning, complaining on Sunday before the pay-per-view and screwing up Horseshoe, or I always call him Horseshoe, but Luther's finish. And I was sitting ringside, and Johnny Ace is in the ring, and Charlie's like, I can't take this finish. I can't take this finish. And Luther's like, Lodi, get in here, show him how to do it. And I got in there because I knew what it was and took it. I'm like, Charlie, if I can do it, you can do it. And so Charlie didn't like that a whole lot. But the whole thing was, he was just trying to, he wasn't happy about having to put Luther over. But yeah, I was happy to see him make a comeback and do so well. That was a great success story to me.
Yeah, he's definitely a success story, and I think he's still doing well from what I see once in a while. I see him post things, and he seems like he's still doing successful. To bring it back to the beginning of WCW, Lodi, I want to hear what that pressure was like debuting live on pay-per-view for WCW. I think you said about 3 months into your entire career.
Well, 3 months into being at the power plant. I'd wrestled for about 1.5 years on the indies before I went down and tried out the power plant. And listen, if you ever saw any of those videos about how hard the power plant was, they don't scratch the surface. I was in the military. I was in the Army, went through the reserves, went through basic training. And we started our tryout on Wednesday morning with 27 guys. And Friday afternoon at lunch, we had 3 guys left, and we made it through. And they invited 2 of the 3 to come back. One of the kids was about 5'8", and they're like, hey, congratulations, you made it through the tryout. You're too small, we can't use you. And the worst thing was and I learned this after I started the power plant, you had 40, 50 guys a month showing up. Back in 97, paying $250 each, and most of them quit by lunch the first day. We were squatting and push-ups and sprinting and squatting and push-ups and sprinting and bumping, and it was just a money racket for Jody Hamilton and the guys down at the power plant to make money because they ran half the guys off by the first day, But once I got through, came back and started, I met Raven at a bar one night. I was out with Johnny Attitude, and Raven had just started at WCW, just came down from ECW and moved to Atlanta. And it was so funny because Johnny was like, hey, there's Raven. Let's go say hello. And I wasn't an ECW fan, and I really wasn't a fan of Ravens. And I said, bro, I don't know him. I'm not going to go bug him. Go say hello, whatever. And Johnny comes back like 5 minutes later. He goes, hey, Raven wants to meet you. And I'm like, what? Raven doesn't know me. He said, no, he doesn't know you. But I told him you're a personal trainer and all about your competing. He wants a personal trainer. Go talk to him. And so I went over there, and Raven starts grilling me, just asking me all these questions about who I've trained and what I've done. And actually, I was one of those guys I was much better at training other guys to get in shape than I was myself. Mm-hmm. And I trained a couple of guys who competed in the Junior USA and came in second, and that kind of thing. And so Raven gave me his address. He goes, okay, you're hired. We start tomorrow. Come pick me up. Here's my address. And by the end of the first week of me training him, he kind of got into my story. He's like, so what are you doing, kid? And I had sold my gym and moved to Atlanta and to go to the power plant. And I said, this and indie wrestling. And he said, what would you think about being my personal assistant? I'll hire you. I'll give you $300 a week to, run errands when I'm not here and that kind of thing. And I'm like, yeah, what have I got to lose? So Raven hired me at the end of the first week of being his personal trainer on top of that as his personal assistant. And about 3 months later, we're sitting in a bar one night, and he asked me, he's like, man, I really need you on the road with me. I wish you were on TV. I'm like, yeah, me too. And at that time, the only thing I had done, I'd been down to the WCW Pro tapings at Universal down at Disney for that show that used to come on Saturday mornings where the ring turned, et cetera, whatever. Mm-hmm. And so I'd done a couple of jobs down there. So he calls Terry Taylor. And I tell this story all the time. It was 11:30. We're sitting in the bar, and Raven's on the phone. I'm sitting there, and Raven's like, hey, Terry, what do you think about Brad Kane down at the power plant? Can I put him in the flock on Monday? Stevie Richards had just gotten hurt, so Stevie was out. He said, can I put him in the flock on Monday, take Stevie's place? Oh, really? I didn't think about that. Okay. Yeah, you're right. Okay, thanks. And he hangs up. I'm like, well, that didn't sound too good. I guess he said no. He goes, no, you're not starting Monday. I forgot about the pay-per-view on Sunday. You're starting Sunday. This is Thursday night at 11:30, and we're in a bar, and I've got dark hair. And he's like, kid, you don't look like a star. He said, we need to get you some blonde hair and make you Billy Idol. Go buy some black leather pants and dye your hair tomorrow and catch my flights. He pulls up his Rolodex or whatever, his planner. He's like, my flight's 8:30. Here's the number. Get on my flight, and WCW will reimburse you for your flight. And I'm like, really? He goes, yeah, just trust me. They'll pay you back. And so I booked a flight and went to Detroit for the pay-per-view. And that day, personally for me, I had never been in front of, more than 1,000 people on a show.
Right.
And so for me as a kid growing up and watching the Chicago Bulls play the Detroit Pistons, in the Palace at Auburn Hills, and all of a sudden I'm sitting up there watching the set being built, and I'm sitting up in the bleachers thinking, man, I'm going to be here tonight on a pay-per-view in front of, 18,000 fans, but millions of people at home. This is pretty cool. I was a little nervous, but I didn't have to wrestle. I just had a spot where I was going out, and it was the night Raven beat up Scotty Riggs. Right. And we carried Riggs off and put Riggs in the flock. That was my first night on TV. So I didn't have a lot to do, but still, there was some pressure on me, not from anybody else. It was all self-inflicted, but it was a cool way to start my professional wrestling career for sure.
It's definitely unique. Yeah, you're in an elite group of people who just hopped out of the crowd on a major pay-per-view. That's so cool to get the inside look. Matt, I want to dive into all the reality wrestling stuff you've been doing because it's very cool. But before that, I'd love to talk about some of your OVW experiences. And we got a great look from wrestlers at what OVW was like. But can you take us deeper in there, what you learned from Al Snow?
Oh, man. So at OVW, wrestlers, it covers a little bit. It covers the people in that story. It doesn't really cover what it's actually like down there, I would say. You got a few guys on there that are highlighted once you see that show, like Cash Flow, God bless him. He's now part of
Tulsa King.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that.
Big Stallone fan. Sorry.
That's
I didn't know
Cash
Flow was. I love Tulsa King. I didn't realize that.
He's on. Cash Flow is on season 2 of Tulsa King, and he's doing a phenomenal job.
Killing it.
Yeah, he's doing a great job. But Haley J's on there, so it was primarily about Haley J. As a matter of fact, that show helped her get looked at by WWE. But as far as OVW is concerned, you walk in, right, and you look. It looks like an industrial park. It's a warehouse, right? And you get in there, you open the door, and you're in this yellow. It creates like a yellow hallway. It goes straight on both sides like this. You're in between, right? And you got pictures on the right, pictures on the left of all these former students and alumni that were at OVW. And it lasts for about 30 seconds. And then there's the door to the locker room, right? So you can go into the locker room. There's a hallway down there. Now this is all changed, by the way. They just had a big, I think, $200,000 revamp program done to the locker room and the studio itself, or to the Davis Arena rather. But they had more and more pictures of all the success stories that were once in OVW. So at the time when I got there, it was easily the coolest locker room I was into, because it had an upstairs and a downstairs. It had a production room. It had a faux locker room, where you could throw people up against the locker and create like a ruckus or whatnot for pre-tapes and everything like that. And then you had the Danny Davis production room, which Al's just sitting in there. And if I could do my Al impression for a minute, it's been a minute, so give me a sec. But he's like, all right, we're going to do about 3 minutes of this, and then we're going to have, cash flow run in, and let's hope we get this done right. Otherwise, it's going to go to shit. And he's watching he's watching, yeah, and he's watching the whole thing. You cut through the production room, and then you're right into the gorilla position, and then you come out and you look around, and it just wraps all the way around, right? Just a big wrap around. As soon as you come out, a nice little straight up ramp to the ring. And the ring itself is one of two 20 by 20 rings that I've been in my entire 12-year career outside of a WWE ring. Mm-hmm. So to work with Al per se, he tells you the philosophy and the like the textbook definitions, and making you think of things differently than you would by literally anywhere else. He is the culmination of reiteration of great phrases and refurbished knowledge from other people. He somehow has found a way to take knowledge from X person, Y person, Z person, B person, A person, C person, keep that all in his head, and be able to reiterate that to you in training or when you go out there. But the biggest thing that he would always say to you before you go out there is, what is the business of this match? What are we trying to achieve here? Right? What is this otherwise known today as like, what's the story we're trying to tell here? Is this a specific type of match? What kind of match are we trying to have here? What's happened up until this point between, let's say, me and Lodi, right? Like me and Lodi have had some kind of program going on or something like that. This match might be a little bit different than the first match we've had because of things that have transpired week after week after week after week. You get what I'm saying? So those are the things that kind of resonated as well. And then just the total and complete breakdown of the psychology of wrestling as a whole. There's this thing that a lot of guys do on the indies. They call it the 7-step cookie cutter match. I'm not really a fan of it as much anymore because not many matches are like that. For example, you have these guys that go out there. It's basically what you would see in a championship match at like Mania. Good guy up, good guy down, bad guy's got his up, bad guy gets lost, good guy's coming back, and then we go right back home, right? Essentially in the story, right? But not every match is going to be like that. If I were to get in there with Braun Strowman, first time around, I'm not going to be able to, do all those things like a Cody Rhodes would be able to do to Roman Reigns. You know what I mean? So every match is different, and that's the biggest thing that I took away from him is how to implement who am I working with and how can I tell a story that way, and then the psychology behind how we're going to get there. And then the last biggest thing that I learned from Al, and well, it wasn't necessarily Al, but it was at OVW, was when you're putting together a match, right? A lot of people, and I was trained to just, hey, you got to finish, go out there and call it. And not a lot of guys can do that. And from my generation, Lodi, I'm pretty sure that's probably almost how it always was for me. And God bless, because that's how I was trained. So that's
awesome.
You know, some guys would come up to me, some greenhorns would come up to me out here in Chicago. Hey, Matt, what do you want to do tonight? And be like, well, some shine, some heat, maybe a finish or two,
Yeah.
But no, a lot of these guys want to talk stuff out, but they'll talk it, in chronological order. And that's not really necessarily, in my opinion, it's not really the best way to do things, because I start from the finish and work my way back, because the theory and psychology rather behind it is, if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to know how to get there.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? You'd be lucky to get there if you don't know where you're going. Right. So if you don't know where you're going, you're not going to know how to get there. So that's why I always start with a finish when it comes to putting matches like myself together. That's one of the biggest things that I learned at OVW, not necessarily from Al.
Right. Interesting. So start at the end. Well, I got to say, first of all, you are great at painting a picture. I felt like I was in OVW as you're taking us down the hallway and everything. That was awesome. But but really great. Definitely words of wisdom from Al and what you've learned there. Lodi, do you have any experiences with OVW or Al over the years?
Well, yeah, I've known Al forever. So yeah, we filmed a couple of movies together and been on lots.
How was my
Al
impression, by the way?
It was great. I felt like he was right here. That was a good one. You nailed it. I was like, I was getting excited. I was like, this is going to be good or it's going to be terrible, and it was good. It was good. A funny story about talking about, planning too much out. I was kind of, raised and brought up that way, where we didn't plan A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. I can't remember that much. I'm not that smart. I jokingly tell people I never claimed to be super intelligent, but I'm persistent. But again, if you plan all that stuff out, like Matty said, you get out there and the fans aren't buying it, and you keep doing it. We got to entertain them. Then what, right? But one of my very first matches ever my very first match ever with Brad Armstrong. I hate telling this story to the day, because I get to a TV tape and it's for Saturday night for the TBS, the Super Show, right? And I look on the board and we're on the first taping, because we always taped. We did 20 matches. We did one Saturday night, 10 matches. Then we did 10 more matches for the next Saturday night. But it was me against Brad Armstrong, and I'm over. Lodi should never beat Brad Armstrong in any wrestling show ever. There's just no reason. I have so much respect for that family, but because of where I was on the card and what we were doing with the flock, so I go to Brad and I'm like, Brad, hey, I saw you and me tonight. Whenever you want to get together, I'll be glad. Whatever you want to do, sir. And Brad and I knew each other from being on the road together, but we didn't hang out all the time. We weren't best friends or anything like that. And Brad's like, I'll get with you in a few minutes, Lodi. Is that okay? I'm like, sure, Brad, whatever you need. And Brad finds me a while later, and he goes, hey, man, I know you came from the power plant, and I know how you guys like to call everything ahead of time. And he goes, that's just not my style. Would you mind? Do you trust me? I got to put you over, and I promise I'll make you like $1 million. Is it okay with you if I just call everything in the ring? And I'm thinking to myself, Brad Armstrong is asking me if it's okay with me if he calls everything in the ring. And Brad was by far one of the best 5 I was ever in the ring with. If you ever go back and watch that match, I walked through the curtain knowing I was going over. That was it. Brad called that entire match in the ring and made me look like $1 million. And all I did was listen, because Brad was that good. And so to go back to your story, I feel like I do with that with my kids now, and they're like, you make it so easy. All I have to do is listen to you, Lodi. I'm like, told you, it's not that hard. But at that point in my career, I hadn't been wrestling 2.5 years. I was so green, like I said, I didn't know what I was doing. But I've got Brad Armstrong calling stuff for me. brother, get out of here. He can make anybody look good, you know? So when you've got someone with that kind of experience, and after 29 years of doing this, I'm no Brad Armstrong, but I got coming the basics down at least. You know, I can kind of do that now. But it's interesting, like you said, these kids who like to plan so much out, then they forget half their stuff. Or again, they get out there and start doing this stuff, and the fans just aren't buying it. And on an indie show, they keep going. They can't change gears because they don't know how to do that. They're like, these fans aren't listen. They're not buying anything we're doing, but they keep doing what they laid out. So I like the fact that you can call things in the ring, because that is a little bit of a lost art. And some of the kids that I train now are trying to get there. They're like, Lodi, when can we start calling stuff in the ring? I'm like, you can get in there and try it now. And they realize pretty quick, they're like, wow, that's hard.
Well, you know, we when I first came in, the promoter, the guy I worked for him for up until like 2000, basically 2020. Well, after the first year and a half, I had to get retrained by this guy because he had the connection with Canyon Seaman from WWE at the time, and then COVID, and they all got flushed out. Dark times for me, really dark times. So I'm gonna leave it at that. But coming up, he was just getting sick and tired of the guys in the roster just calling everything, because he's a territory guy himself. He was trained essentially by Lawler and then World Class Championship. You know, Lawler, to this day, I went and worked an indie show with Lawler. He was on it, and I go, you know, hey, Randy Ritchie says, screw you. And he goes, what? Are you kidding me? Randy Ritchie, I love that guy. How is he doing? I'm like, he's banned on Facebook again, you know, and whatever.
Oh,
and
no.
like, of course he is, of course. But he calls it the random fandom. And what he would do is he would essentially just put names in a hat of everybody on the roster, and he'd give it to the fans, and they'd pick out the name. Okay, Matty Ice, and then the next guy would be, okay, oh, Lodi. All right, so Matty Ice. So you had no idea who you were working, and you get your finish in the ring. That is the best thing. We did that for 2 years straight. 2 years straight. And that you want to get good at wrestling. That's how you get good.
I agree.
And then eventually you're working with just about everybody. You have a roster of, hell, you don't even need that many people, you know, but you get a roster of, like, let's say it's even just 15. Oh my God, you got endless possibilities for years almost. It's just amazing. You know, and it's just a little tidbit for like maybe an undercard part of the show. But boy, that was at first it was challenging, and then I was like, I can't wait to see who I'm working, because I can't wait to see how I'm gonna get this done with them. You know? But that was that's one of the biggest things. And hell, like you were talking about Booker, Jonah, he pulled one of those things with Randy Orton. I brought Booker to a show in Lexington, Kentucky. Well, it'd be Lawrenceburg, but it's just outside of Lexington. And he was telling me, he's like, man, Matty, I can't believe you got me out here, man. This is crazy. And I go, yeah. Thanks, Book. Thanks for doing this, Book. And some of the guys come up like, you got any stories? They always ask, like, you got stories. They don't want to ask, like, hey, what do you think is like a great idea for this or this? They always want to hear the stories. I go, guys,
the stories.
It's always story stuff. And I was never, I felt like that was a little markish, you know, to do. But I know Mark's kind of like a negative term, but like even for the guys, but like I hate when I hear guys come, like, you're aspiring to do this in the business and you're asking for stories from the guy. Why don't you ask for advice on what to do? But, you know, so he goes, all right, I got a story. You want a story? I got a story for you. You know, so he's like, I don't know, it was like some kind of Raw or something. And Randy Orton comes up to me, and he goes, hey, Book, you know, you got anything you want to do tonight, Book? I have no idea what they just told me me up or whatever the hell, or Kane's coming out or something like that. You got any idea what you want to do? All right, Randy, let me get a Red Bull. I'll get back to you in a minute. Just give me about 30 minutes. I'm gonna get myself a Red Bull. I'll get back to you in a minute. Okay, cool. 30 minutes go by. Randy Orton's looking all over for Booker, and he finds him and goes, Did you get a chance to think about anything, Book? Nah, Randy, I didn't even get my Red Bull yet, man. Hang on, give me about another 10 minutes. I'll come meet you. I'll get you Red Bull. Right? Time's going down. An hour goes by. They're almost up in the gorilla, but Randy comes like, "Hey, you want to talk about this? You want to get a couple things in last minute? We haven't talked about anything." It's like, shit, Randy. Like, I'm having Red Bull right now. Let me get this finished up. I'll come meet you about 5 minutes. 5 minutes. We'll meet you up. If not, I'll meet you over in Gorilla. Okay. And so next thing you know, he killed off the time. He filibustered the time and whatnot. And now they're going out. They're going out there, and they go out and they have to do the match on the fly. And then Randy Orton comes back and he goes, "Look, is it really that easy?" He goes, "That's what I'm saying, man. That's what I'm trying to say." So he basically worked him into like doing the whole match on the fly. It was pretty great. If you ever get a chance to have Book on, but like, man, that's one story that he's told me repeatedly.
If you'd told that story, if you'd told that story about anybody else, I might have called BS on it. But I've worked with Book.
Yeah,
I've worked with Booker a lot, and that is Booker to a T. Booker T. So my very first match with Booker and Stevie Ray was Scotty Riggs and I in a tag match. And the whole story was, it was the night the NWO took over WCW. And so the deal was, Riggs was going to start the match. Riggs was going to wrestle with Book, tag me in, and Riggs was going to go set with the Flock and leave me by myself to get butchered by Harlem Heat. It was supposed to be a 6-minute match. Riggs is in for a minute and a half. He's out. They beat me up, go home. So because I'm taking most of the match, I go up to Booker T and Stevie Ray. I'm like, "Hey, guys, you got any idea what we're going to do tonight?" "We'll get with you in a little while, kid." "All right, thanks." Go back to him a little while later. "Hey, guys, what are we going to do tonight?" Just put on your bumping boots, kid. We'll get with you in a little while." "All right." The third or fourth time, "Kid, just wear your bumping boots. You wear your bumping boots, you'll be good." I'm like, "Guys, any idea what we're going to do?" "Just put on those bumping boots." They told me nothing. So we go out for a 6-minute match, right? And here's the thing about TV at WCW. I don't care how much time you've got on the wall, it always gets cut. Always gets cut. I had a match one night with Eddie Guerrero. When we showed up at TV, we had 18 minutes for our match. It got cut to 12. It got cut to 8. We got in the ring. We had a 2-minute go home. We get in the ring, and Nick Patrick says, "Go home." I mean, our 18-minute match got cut to 2. We went straight to the finish. The reason I bring that story up is your matches always get cut. We got a 6-minute match. NWO taking over WCW went faster than they expected. We get in the ring, and you can watch Nick Patrick leans into Booker T and goes, "Hey, you guys got 14 minutes. And Booker shakes his head, but doesn't tell anybody. So Riggs tags in. Riggs does a minute and a half, tags out. I get left in the ring with Harlem Heat for like 11 minutes. I took every move they've got. But the whole show, the match started with the entire arena going, "Lodi sucks. Lodi." Because I was everybody hated me. The entire place is Lodi sucks. By the end of the match, because they hit me with every finish in the book and I kicked out because it wasn't time to go home, the whole place is chanting, "Lodi, Lodi." I took everything they had. It was so bad. Saturn even got mad at them afterwards for taking me. I didn't know any better, but he got mad at Booker T and Stevie Ray and said, "You guys took liberties with that kid. It was unnecessary. You guys were rough with him, and he didn't deserve it." We got back in the locker room, and they both came up to me and apologized. They were like, "We didn't know you could work." I'm like, "What are you talking about?" Because at that time, I only had one match. I had one match with Benoit 2 weeks earlier. So that was my second match on TV on Nitro. And they're like, "Dude, we just thought you were one of Raven's drug boys and he got you a job. We didn't realize you could actually work. Next time we'll let you do some stuff." But they hit me with so many moves. It was just ridiculous. I mean, it was a straight, 10 minutes of them killing me and me kicking out of everything they did. So, but the same story. Put on your bumping boots, kid. That's all they told me. I just went out there and took whatever they had for me. But yeah, Booker was notorious for that.
I mean, we're talking all about preparation before a match and just going out there and doing it. I want to know, Lodi,
Yeah,
that Goldberg match at Spring Break, and was there any
yeah.
conversation before, or what was that one like?
Oh, yeah. So here's the thing. Um, I have a different view of Goldberg than most people because we trained together at the power plant. Bill and I were good friends. I took Bill's jackhammer and I took Bill's spear at the power plant before we went to TV, time after time after time. Me and my tag team partner, we used to do it on a daily basis down at the power plant so Bill would have it down before they put him on TV. I'll tell you, so our our Panama City spring break match, no, that went off exactly the way we planned it. The only difference was there was supposed to be a spot where he gorilla pressed me into the pool afterwards, but Hall and Nash showed up late, drunk, and they wanted to jump into the pool later. So we had to take the pool spot out because they kiboshed ours so they could do it. So yeah, but
Oh, that's crazy. So that was originally supposed to be you.
Yeah, that was supposed to be me. Bill was throwing me into the pool, and Hall and Nash showed up drunk. I don't know, right before showtime, and they wanted to dive in the pool, so they kiboshed me going into the pool since they wanted to do it later, which I totally get. And Hall and Nash had the right to pull that card anywhere. But one cool story I want to share about Bill because he gets a lot of flack over the Bret Hart match and different things or whatever. But we were in talk about Lexington, Kentucky. We were up arena, and I was wrestling Psychosis on Nitro, and Psychosis broke my ankle with a moonsault to the outside. He didn't come out as far as he told me where to stand, and he's coming halfway out, and I look up, and if I don't step in to catch him, he lands on his head and dies. So we were always trained. I let myself get hurt before my opponent gets hurt because my job is to send him home the same way I found him. So when I stepped in, he lands on my knee, falls back, and breaks my ankle. Well, I had never broken a bone before, but at that point, I realized something was wrong. I'm telling Mickey J, a referee, I'm like, we got to go home. We got to go home. And so, and my dog's joined us here. Bexley, you want to be famous?
Loves this story.
So, yeah. So I'm telling Mickey J, I'm like, we got to go home. At that time, Psychosis wasn't speaking good English. So we had like a 2-minute go home plan. And so Psycho slamming me, jumping off the top rope and all this crazy stuff, and had no idea my ankle was broke. So the trainer comes out as we go to commercial break, and Mickey J, we have a long walk down the aisle, and the arena, the way it was set up, the entrance was on the opposite side of the arena where the locker room was. So Coach and the trainer and Mickey J, the referee, are carrying me down the ramp. We barely get back through the curtain before the pyro goes off after the commercial break to start the next segment. And as we go through the curtain, Goldberg had come out of the locker room, came all the way around the building, and was standing there. He pushes Coach and Mickey J out of the way and said, I got him. He picked me up and carries me to the locker room. He saw me get her on the monitor. He carried me all the way around the building back. He said, I would have come to the ring to get you, but they were actually starting to deal with him in Saturn, so there was no way he could come out in front of the fans. But he carried me all the way around Rupp Arena with a broke ankle. So I love Bill to death.
Dude, that's insane. Wow. So Goldberg
Yeah.
really, I mean, maybe paying you back from those early power plant days. That's really cool, though.
He was always a nice guy. You know what was funny? We were on a house show one night, and this is probably a year and a half, 2 years after we were at the power plant. Bill's the world champ and all this stuff. And I'll never forget, even when I was on, house shows, I was always on the first half of the show. If I wasn't the first couple of matches, I think I may have opened the show that night, first or second match. I'd already showered or whatever. And when we had a house show, we had to be there at 6:30. Show started at 7:30. So it's like 8:30, 8:45. I'm already dressed. I was actually riding that loop with Perry Saturn and Scott Hall. Already showered. And here comes Bill. And Bill's walking in the door like 8:30, 8:45 with his bag and everything. And nobody else is in the hallway, so I'm not doing it in front of any of the little boys or whatever. But I'm like, whoa, look at the superstar showing up at 9 o'clock. Must be cool to show up whenever you want. And he stops. He goes, Lodi, what did you do today? I'm like, well, I got up, I went to the gym, drove to the next town. I've already performed. I showed up on time. He said, yeah, last night when we finished the other show in Wheeling, they flew me to Texas for an autograph signing this morning. Then they flew me to Idaho for an autograph signing. I just got off the plane. Is it okay if I go work now? I'm like, Bill, that's why you get paid the big bucks, champ. Have your life, buddy. I would not want that they ran him to death.
Wow.
And that's when I realized, I'm like, I thought I was busy. Back then, we were on the road 22, 23 days a month. Back then when Nitro and Thunder and our TV tapings and house shows were hot. But, for him, there were days where he was doing 2 and 3 autograph signings and a show in 2 or 3 different towns. And I don't know how he pulled that schedule off. It would have killed me. I mean, my schedule was hard enough, and I was happy with what I had.
Yeah. Wow, that commitment though. Yeah, I mean, like you said, it's why
Yeah.
you got paid the big bucks. Matty, Booker T and you have worked so closely in Reality of Wrestling, of course, on the Heat and other projects. Can you take us through what you've learned from Booker in your time in Reality of Wrestling?
Yeah, well, you know, things with Booker, I was up until recently, I was on like Zoom calls with him, every like 3 weeks, 2, 3 weeks, just going over certain things. Like he would tell me, you wouldn't be, you don't sell like this, or, in this situation, you don't do these, like no silly selling, none of that stuff. Cause, I was always a fan coming up of like, Bob Orton's kind of sell, right? And he could like over accentuate, over exaggerate. I'm a big Orton fan in general, like all three of the direct family members, even a little bit with Bear. But like one of my favorites is, even though Randy Orton is probably obviously the favorite, his dad is phenomenal at selling things and making them 10 times better than they were. I saw him do something. I can't even remember where it was. I think it was almost like a short, or I think even Randy himself posted it to social media, where he took, it could have been like an atomic drop, or he got stunned in the face, and then he did this like spaghetti leg, like back and forth like this, and he stumbled 3 steps forward and knocked himself out on the turnbuckle. Like, I'm stealing that. I'm stealing that. I don't care. I'm using that. I did it at Books, and he got mad at me. He's like don't sell like that. Don't sell like that. You're gonna be a top guy. You don't sell like that. Like, you do that, it's like right before the end of the match. And I'm like, huh. So I went back and I watched all these insane sells of what would be considered the modern era. And, the only person that would really do so would probably be like Randy, because he's a phenomenal seller, or even Dolph Ziggler or someone like that. So I looked at that, and, it brings me back to Elimination Chamber this past year, where Orton was working his back. He was selling his back from the surgery, but the knockout sell, the silly sell, as you would say, that didn't come until Logan Paul knocked him with the brass knucks.
Yeah.
Because after that, it was pretty much over with. It's either, you got like 1 or 2 things you can do from there. And that's why you save those silly sells or sells like that for those moments. Otherwise, if you're in a fight and you get tagged, boom. But if you get punched for real in a fight and like a lot of these indie guys, they take the big sell like this and their arms are flailing up in the air and doing this, that, and the other thing. Well, it's like, well, if you're in a boxing fight, if a boxer was doing that, he's probably almost done. You know what I'm saying? So that was one thing that I definitely learned from him. And then feeling the timing of just about everything. It's like next level stuff of, some guys take too long to get into their finish when it's just got to be faster, faster, faster. Because that's, going back to a little bit of what Al is, what the most important part of the wrestling match is the finish, essentially. Comeback could be second, it might be included into the finish, but the biggest thing, the most likely thing that people will remember from a wrestling match is the finish. Case in point, like, you can name me your top 5 wrestling matches. I bet you can't tell me how most of them started, but you can tell me who won, though. You know what I mean? So things like that, that's got to be crisp. That's got to be on point. That's got to make sense, and it's got to be perfected. And that's why a lot of these guys, they got to get their cardio down, because by the time it comes to the finish, it looks so terrible that it kills them off. I'm trying to keep it as nicely phrased as possible, but it looks so bad that it kills them off. They could be doing a trillion different cool things in the ring. They could be beating the hell out of each other, going up top rope, 790 splashes, whatever they're called now. I can't go up top. But they do all these things off the top rope. They do all these acrobatic things, but by the time it gets to the finish, they're so gassed that the finish looks terrible. But that, and then, just him walking me to the ring for the last 2 years up until, August really was a time of my life. And I swear one of the first times he was walking me to the ring, we had one of those situations, Lodi, where how you had like 12 minutes or 18 minutes, then 12 and 10.
Yeah.
Well, he's like, all right, you guys, you can have 8 minutes for this match. And then so we're coming down the ring. He's like, oh yeah, Matty, like holding my trap, rubbing the traps out, like pump him up, give him a flex on him, Matty. Okay, great, yada yada yada. Then my opponent's music hits, and he goes, what the hell? And he goes, all right. He pulls me in. He's like, all right, Matty, yeah. And he pulls me in. He's like, listen. And he goes, fuck this motherfucker. He killing himself off with his entrance. All right, 5 minutes. Forget 8. 5 minutes.
Oh.
Get to business. Top Golf closes at 11 tonight. Let's get out of here. That was one of the funniest things I ever heard from Book in the ring. It was great. But yeah, there's a lot of things that I don't think we had time to mention, but those would probably be the top few things as far as my personal journey that I've learned from Booker. And I wish, I hope there's a lot more to come, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, the work you've done so far with the Heat is awesome. To see you work so closely with him and really see him be so hands-on in Reality of Wrestling. I think everyone should definitely go check it out if they haven't. And as you're saying these things, I'm remembering them too, like the Randy Orton cell, like those big moments that just stick in your mind, but keep them definitely towards the end. Is there a day where you learn how to do the spin-a-roonie in Booker's class? Because you do a pretty decent one.
I was wondering if you found out that I learned how to do it. So I learned how to do it. So ironically, I never learned it from him. I learned it from this. Yeah. So the guy he's with now, he's associated with now, was the guy that I took the championship from the first time when the Heat was formed. I was the guy, I was the front runner for the Heat. Kind of makes sense. Ice and Heat, Matty Ice, the Heat. So this guy, Edge Stone, who was the guy I took the championship from, or he allowed me to win, rather. He passed the torch to me for the championship, and he spent the next year, regrouping and whatnot. And then even more so, a year and a half, because I had won the belt 2 times over before he got it back. And so he's associated with him now. But the guy, Edge Stone, I go, man, I'm associated with Booker, and I've never even tried to do the spin-a-roonie. Not once. I go, I should at least try this thing. And I knew he could do it, but he can only do it while he's laying on his back. He'll lay on his back and he'll just kick his feet and spin back up into a spin-a-roonie. Right. I do it exactly like how he does, but I find a way to land up on my feet as opposed to like spinning back to my knees. So he taught me a little bit, and then a couple of the guys there, Joey Heiderman from the Highwaymen, he's part of Reality Wrestling as well. Bless him. He's a freak athlete. He's also part of the Air Force. So got great respect for him, because a lot of my friends outside of wrestling are from the military. So I always pay a lot of respect to those guys. Those guys worked their butts off, but he was the one who helped me get that nailed in. But Edge Stone and Joey Heiderman were the guys who helped me learn how to do the spin-a-roonie. It was not Booker T. So no, I did not learn it from Booker. I wish I did, but I did not learn it.
That's awesome. That's a cool story. You're already doing to do it. Lodi, for you, what has been keeping you busy recently? I mentioned the speeches at the beginning. What else has been really, and of course, Team Fearless Academy. Take us through what you're really up to these days.
Yeah. Well, so probably back in 2010, 2011, I ran back into one of my old students that I'd trained back in 2001 when I first came off TV, Scotty Matthews. And he had recently turned his life over to Christ. And that was something that I had done a little earlier. And he and I formed a tag team called Team Fearless. And our whole tagline was, we're fearless to stand in any locker room, any wrestling arena, any street corner, and talk about our love for Jesus Christ. And so I've really used my wrestling as my ministry for the last 14 years. And so, again, as a heel on TV, I always came out with a sign, this town sucks, or we hate El Paso, or whatever. And so now I have Bible verses. And so out of that, I've done a whole lot of speaking engagements, and that's become something that I've done, up until COVID, 2 and 3, 4 times a month. 2 weeks ago, I actually did 9 school assemblies in 4 days, and then spoke at the show for a Christian Wrestling Federation group. We were back in my hometown. And so my whole deal with the Wrestling Academy, I was so blessed along the way at the power plant to train under so many guys. Like, DDP was at the power plant when I was there. I learned a lot from him. Being on the road with Raven for 2 years, Raven taught me more, like I said, than anybody else in this business. And just spending time with him, you can't help but get better and learn more about the business. When I left WCW, I ran Dusty Rhodes Wrestling Company for almost 2 years, Turnbuckle Championship Wrestling. And so I feel like I've been blessed with a whole lot of knowledge, and being a fan of wrestling, for me not to pass that on to some of the younger kids would be such a waste. And so I've been very thankful that since we opened the wrestling school in 2018, I talked about training Charlotte Flair. I was her first trainer before she went to WWE. I was so just blown away in 2000, right before COVID, in 2019. Arn Anderson, who I've known even before I got into wrestling and worked with him at WCW, of course, he came to me and asked me if I could train Brock. So I trained Brock before he went to AEW. So Brock Anderson's one of my students. Brock and Arn still come in once a week. And to bring this thing whole circle, and, obviously growing up watching Arn and then training his son, I have a super fondness for Brock. And Brock is doing phenomenal right now. He's tagging with CW Anderson a lot. They're working at MLW, working at AML here in the Carolinas. One of the other things that's really cool that I got to share with both you guys that the wrestling world doesn't, I posted on Instagram, but, again, I don't have a gazillion followers. One of the coolest things ever. 6 weeks ago, I started training Magnum TA's son. And Magnum TA's son is only a junior in high school. Tucker's only 16. So obviously he's got a couple years of school left, but he's just learning, and the kid picks everything up quick. Obviously, he never saw his dad wrestle on TV. His dad already had his accident before Tucker was ever born. But Arn and Brock still come to school once a week, and they only come on Monday or Wednesday nights. My beginner nights are on Tuesday. So Magnum comes in with Tucker on Tuesdays. And 2 weeks ago, Magnum was there, and Magnum watches. And Magnum has been great to have around. And obviously, having Arn at the wrestling school, he helps the kids. And I tell Arn this all the time, like, Arn, I can never pay you for what you're worth to have you here, because he works with the young kids, and to have a WWE Hall of Famer, and especially Arn Anderson be there, is phenomenal. But 2 weeks ago on a Tuesday night, Magnum's there, son's Tucker there, Brock and Arn show up. And Tucker's had like 3 practices, but I could not resist putting Tucker in the ring with Brock. So I'm sitting there in my chair, and I've got Magnum TA on my left side. I've got Arn Anderson on my right, and their sons are in the ring together for the first time ever, kind of rolling around, just starting to do some, just some chain wrestling. And Magnum leans into me and he goes, Lodi, I want to say thank you. You don't know how surreal this is for me to watch my son wrestle Arn's son. I said, Magnum, no disrespect, sir, but you don't know how surreal this is for me to sit in between you and Arn, who I grew up watching, and know both of your kids who I trained are about ring wrestling. And he's like, you may win that one, Lodi. I said, I think I do. So that was a really cool wrestling experience. So we have some really cool things like that. And having the wrestling school, I'm so thankful, because so many of my friends stop in every once in a while. Sick Boy will stop by. We've had, Dax Harwood's come by. Chris Statlander's in Charlotte. She comes by. Caleb Conley. So I've got a lot of guys who drop in. So my students are always like, wow, Magnum TA's here. Arn's here. Nikita comes by. Sam Houston drops in every once in a while. So I just have a plethora of guys come in who can share their knowledge with my kids. So it's not just always me yelling at them, you know. They get yelled at by somebody else who's been around a lot longer and knows more than I do. But between the wrestling school, and I still wrestle every weekend and blessed to do that. But at 54, I know I have many, many matches behind me, a lot more than I do ahead of me. So that's going to slow down at some point. But I'm just thankful and blessed that God still allows me to do what I do and share the gospel with fans at wrestling shows that I get to do now. So again, the wrestling school, and then I have my personal training studio. I stay pretty busy, and I'm thankful for that.
Yeah. I mean, you put on a match that might headline, probably will headline a pay-per-view years from now with those two. That's awesome, man. And
Yeah,
also,
very cool.
must feel good that so many veterans put their faith in you to train those second generation stars.
Training Rick's, training Ashley was cool, and then being able to train Brock was cool. And at this point, training Magnum's son, I can't even talk about it any more than just saying it. It's beyond. You go back and tell 12-year-old me that I'm going to not only wrestle one day and be friends with the guys that I grew up idolizing, but they're also going to trust me to the point where they're going to allow me to train their kids.
Yeah.
Just a blessing beyond belief, man. So when I say I've lived a charmed and blessed life, I think I win.
Yeah. No, you definitely do. I mean, you've given some great advice so far in this interview. Do you have any lasting words for Matty Ice as he continues on here?
Matty, keep going, man. You've been blessed to be under the learning tree of some really good guys, man. You got Al Snow and Booker T giving you advice. I can't think of a lot of guys off the top of my head that you could go to right now that are better than those two. And I love those guys dearly. Please tell Book I said hello next time you talk to him.
I will.
Yeah.
That's I was gonna say, right before you give me the send off, Jonah, I want to go to Lodi's place right now, man. Everywhere
anytime.
I've gone, I would love, honestly, I would love to come. So when I was part of the NWA for a short stint for actually 2 years, I snuggled up to Austin Idol. I still want to get out there, but he's pretty bad at using a cell phone for text messages. He blows up the text on his phone so much that the text is about this big.
Oh wow!
Like one letter, it's about that big.
Yeah.
It's enormous. I wanted to go out to see his school, and I hope the school is still running, but I have since not worked there anymore, and I don't really keep in contact with him. But I wanted to go to see him in South Carolina.
Yeah, he's about an hour and a half away. So if you ever make it down there, I'm in Charlotte. He's in Greenville, and I'm in Charlotte. Okay. So if you're ever around, man, by all means.
Okay. Yeah, no, I'd love to. I'd love to come down. I've also, I wanted to go there. I wanted to go to the House of Champions in Florida. My friend runs that place. I wanted to go to the Dungeon 2.0 down in Florida, see TJ and Natalia. I've done things the opposite way as far as the average indie wrestler, just before we go off here. But like a lot of indie guys, they'll go up, they'll sign a school. But they, when I smell something's like too good to be true, let's just say, it ain't. So when I first signed up, I got signed up, and the guy said he promised me a tryout within 2 years. And I quickly learned, like, if I could get a tryout from this guy to WWE, if he could get us a tryout, rather, he'd probably get it for himself first, more so than anybody else. Yes. But here's the big thing is that I wasn't learning anything, really. I was learning how to do cool spots, but I didn't learn, like, why I'm doing what I'm doing. So the guy I went to, Randy Ritchie, years of the territories working with Lawler, Jerry Jarrett, all the guys at World Class. That's valuable knowledge that it's going to be going away very, very soon, because not a lot of guys have come up in that era. And then going from there to OVW, learning from Al, and then going from OVW, learning to Reality, working Book, but all the meanwhile, a short stint at Impact, and then at NWA, and Billy Corgan signs in a lot of guys with a lot of knowledge as well. But one of them was being Austin Idol, so I've always wanted to go out there and catch a couple classes. I'm still, even to this day, 12 years in, I still want to go to places with people who have done more than me, no matter how minuscule or how extravagant. I still, there's always something to learn, so I always want to go and see as much as I possibly can. I even wanted to go up to Lance Storm, but he shut down his training and whatnot. Down at NWA, I wanted to go see Dr. Tom, but he said, "Hey, if you were working with Book, man, honestly, just keep on the course." But I still wanted to go and see these guys. So, if you'll have me, I'd love to come.
Anytime you're in our area, you got an open invitation, brother. You just let me know. Fantastic. Yes, sir.
Of course. Yeah, I'd love to get your information and get on with that.
We'll take care of that.
Awesome.
Well, that's been awesome. Thank you both so much. This was really fun.
Rewind, recap, relive. For over 50 episodes, the revolutionary force in wrestling interviews.